morning there, folks. Hope you're doing well and you're a little bit into your coffee break there, and you probably need a big cup of coffee and some antacids if you got stressed out over the grumpy old white men debate last night. That was, for my part, it was really entertaining, even though it was incredibly silly there. But let me coin a try here. Oh, by the way, this is Whiff here with you on Smell Test Podcast. I always tend to forget doing that for some reason. I guess I'm just used to talking and not introducing myself there. So let me try to break this down here in my opinion, in my point of view here, what have you. So you have to understand that elections and especially debates, that's all like drama to create instability in the country there. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't have elections or what have you, or debates. But what causes that to happen, as fiercely as it is that we're constantly in this country shifting one way or another depending on the way the breeze blows about how we want our country to be. You know, it's like half the time we want stronger immigration, half the time we don't want stronger immigration, you know. Sometimes we want wage, equality. Sometimes we want to support capitalism. Sometimes we want we want better education in schools. Sometimes we want choice. There's just so many things that keep shifting in the country. It's like we're blowing in the breeze back and forth there, and all that does is create more drama. And so what you get is, you get these problems where you get candidates coming out representing the other side of these ideas all the time, and it's depending on who the people like there that they put in those offices to run those ideas through the country. And then it's like 4 years or 8 years later, they're like, let's try it a different direction there. Even if the wheel ain't broken, they want to fix it. And see, that's the problem, is that we keep going at this like we're changing shirts and not realizing that it's throwing up like the whole idea of stability within the country. Countries have to have kind of a set group of standards and maintain them. We keep changing them all the time. There's so many countries out there that don't change their standards. They got certain things, like as far as marriage is concerned, as far as how their education is concerned. And while you can evolve it more, when you start changing the fundamental concept of how it works, that's when you have problems. Like, for example, in education, you could move from using books to using computers. That's an evolution of education there. But if you keep changing how you review history and say, no, okay, we're going to say now that this did this and this did this, even though that's not the original way it was acknowledged, you start changing the fundamentals of a country and people's perspective on the country. So, for example, here we go back to like the 1776 in the Constitution, which I think was actually like 1778 or what have you, but when it was officially signed there, but I don't remember that date exactly there. But anyways, the point is there that the idea of all men and being created equal, well, what they thought of was equal was based on the times there. And then they began to evolve it as they started to realize that this is not what is equal. And this is not how a society should function. So they started evolving the laws to make it where everybody was equal. Now, when you start changing that and you start changing the fundamentals of equality across the board, is when you start introducing things that disbalance, if you want to call it that right there, disbalance how equality exists. So you got things like affirmative action there. And all that does is push people or not push people. It discourages them from doing their best and striving to get better. Instead, it just says, okay, we're going to give you an opportunity whether you deserve it or not. So what happens is you don't push as hard. Evolution would be like if you got disability people who need technology or what have you to advance, that you give them technology so they can be on an equal level. But when you start giving over advantages to people for things, you start making problems, right? So, for example, things like going into college and what have you. If you give everybody, certain people, free access to college, but others you don't give free access to college, the value of that education is going to be different. The effort put in to that education is going to be different. What you're going to get from that education is going to be different, because you're not going to be putting as much effort in, because you don't lose nothing if you don't invest nothing. And you have to invest more than time. You have to invest there your blood, your sweat, and your tears, so to speak, there. All the things that we talk about all the time and in achieving stuff there. So why I said and all that, I'm saying all that to say that what these things set up is drama for no reason, because instead of us constantly wanting to change how the country runs, we should be talking about how to take it to the next level, not how to change the fundamentals. And as soon as you start trying to change the fundamentals every 4 to 8 years there, because you don't like the guy, you don't like the girl, you don't like this, you don't like that, you want to do all this stuff, that's when you start to create more problems and you start to create tension among the people. And that's how you divide. That's how you fall apart there. Countries have to have a set standard of values and fundamental beliefs and a way of viewing their country in order for it to be stable. And if you don't have that, then you're going to have a lack of that there, and it's going to fall apart. And people are going to be more and more divided every time you keep going back and forth and back and forth. And it's human nature in some way, where in a lot of way there, it's human nature to want to be more change your mind and try new things and here and there and that. But that's not how a country's supposed to work there. So that's when you run into those problems. So as far as this debate thing here, WWE match, ladders and chairs and what have you match last night, that sort of thing is set up to be the way it is. It's just de-evolving more and more, because the differences between how people want the country to be are becoming more and more different. Because you got people who want the country to be more like traditional, based on what the Constitution is, and you got other people who want the country to change from what it originally was into something else. And the more you go back and forth, you're eventually going to create these groups there that have such polar opposite views of how things should work, that's going to break down to the kind of stuff that you had last night there between the president and the former vice president there running for the office. So that's why you got what you got last night there. They have fundamental differences on the way the country should be there. As far as all the stuff that happened there, I'm not sure I want to spend too much of your coffee break there talking about all of it, but let's just talk about a couple of them here now, and maybe I'll talk about a few more of them later tonight. they was talking about the Supreme Court there. And the Trump is trying to name, in addition to 300 judges he's gotten placed on the court because they left seats empty in the over 120 seats empty in the Obama-Biden administration back there from 2009 to 2017. You could call it 2008 to 2016, but they don't start taking over till the year after the election there. But anyway, the Obama administration left 120 judge seats empty. So Trump and his Senate leader there, Mitch McConnell, they worked together and they pushed through those 120 and then filled more seats there in the judgeship there, if you hear that word there. Then he got the Supreme Court nominations there, and he filled 2 seats, and now we're on the 3rd there. And he did make a good point. The president there said that he was hired for 4 years, which I said that the other day. I'm sure a lot of people are saying that. That ain't like, a revolutionary thought there, but he said, I was hired for 4 years, and I'm going to work for 4 years, not for 3 years. As a matter of fact, I was thinking about this as a specific topic the other day for the show thing here, because I want to make that point out. And maybe I will put that out there still, but let's just go with this for now. So he said that, and then he's pressing the former vice president, Mr. Biden, there, saying, hey, look, I want to know who you're going to name to the court. Who are you going to name to the court? Are you going to try and pack the court? Because that's one of the accusations they're giving there towards Biden, is that some of his colleagues within the Democrat Party have talked about ending the filibuster, which means ending the debate, basically. So a filibuster is where somebody, if you don't know this, kids or whoever, a filibuster is when you got a senator or a congressman or what have you, when they get on the floor, and basically they just keep talking and talking and talking with the idea of running out the clock, essentially, on a situation, and trying to essentially drain everybody of energy to the point where they just go, okay, fine. They're trying to break people down, basically. You're trying to break people down, basically. Just through constant talking. Like, there's been some people who've been out there for like 24 hours talking nonstop. They did have fillers, I think, though. They have the right to appoint substitutes there during it, but they can do a filibuster. So they've been talking about ending the filibuster and going to simple majority. So normally to pass a law in Congress, especially in the Senate, they have to have a 60 vote to pass something. Well, a simple majority would just be 51 out of 100, unless they add seats from other states or territories if they want to do that there. So some of the Democrats have talked about ending the filibuster and going to a simple majority and then packing the court, the Supreme Court, that is there. Now, as far as packing the Supreme Court is concerned, you got to understand here that back in the 1800s there, it was during the Johnson administration, there was an act passed called the Judicial Circuits Act. And what that was is this act that basically made it to where there could only be a certain number of justices on the Supreme Court. It was like 7, I think, back then. And the whole reason they did that is because Johnson was wanting to put more people on the Supreme Court, and they wanted to stop him from doing it. So they passed this Judicial Circuits Act, and he couldn't do that. Then about 3 years later or so, basically when Johnson ended his administration, they decided to raise the number to 9. So that was 69 or what have you. So we're talking about over 150 years. There's been 9 Supreme Court justices, and the idea was essentially not to create the Supreme Court and transform it into another version, or really not another version, but to transform it into the same size as a legislative body. They're supposed to be interpreters of law based on the Constitution and what it says. They're not supposed to be legislators. And the idea of putting more of them on there almost turned them into a legislative body. So that's why they decided to keep the number short. The whole idea the Democrats are saying is to pack the court more and maybe go up to even between 13 and 16 people to be on the Supreme Court there, which I don't know that the Republicans haven't talked about doing that. I don't think they have, but I know the Democrats have talked about doing that more. But the whole idea is we're up to like, let's just say 14 as a random number. You're basically increasing the size of the seats by a little bit more than a third, maybe like 40% increase on the number of justices there. And what happens is it becomes lopsided because depending on who gets to appoint those judges, you got this chance of them serving these long life terms, basically, not sentences, but terms. And they can basically dictate how things go in the court. Whereas the way it's normally designed, there's a cycle that happens as a result of people being in the presidency, and usually 1 to 2, sometimes in the rare occasion 3, will come up during a president's term. What we got now is we got a lot of older justices on the court, and that's why you have all these numbers of justices that have been appointed in the last couple of years. I think Obama did 2. Some didn't get to do any. President said he didn't get to nominate any. But you got a lot of them getting older now. And that's how, or they pass away from, sickness or whatever you. And so a president gets to nominate their replacement. So one of the reasons the Democrats have been thinking about packing the court there, the Supreme Court there, is because if they pack it, they would pack it with people who are still young enough and would serve these extended terms. And if they got to nominate and put those people in place there, you're talking about adding 6 seats, which would dramatically change the balance within the Supreme Court long term. And that's what people like the President Trump there and Republicans don't like, is if you keep it at this certain 9, the cycle will happen naturally and it won't get extreme one way or the other. But if you start putting extreme numbers of people in that court, the more you put in, the greater leverage and long last it happens, and the balance shifts more dramatically for a longer period of time. So Joe Biden refused, former Vice President Joe Biden is refusing to tell who he would nominate to the court, or if he would support ending the filibuster and going to simple majority. Oh, I should point out that in the filibuster, it's important to know that a person can filibuster on the floor unless there's a vote that would end the filibuster. That's how you stop a filibuster, is you get enough votes acquired there from a group of the legislators, and they can vote to end the filibuster and then move on to business there. Anyway, he wouldn't answer the question because he said he thought it would distract from the current topic of things. Well, the topic is who's going to be president there. This is why you want people to know who you're going to name to that court. The only reason you wouldn't want people to know who you are thinking about naming to that court is if you think your choices will not be appealing to the public, especially with the Supreme Court. I mean, that's exactly why you keep saying here, the former vice president keeps saying, I may call him VP to save myself some vocal here, but the VP, Biden, is saying, I'm not going to tell you who I'd name to the court because it takes away from the conversation. People need to go and just vote. Well, they're voting based on who they think you're going to put in there. They already know who Trump is going to put in there. You want people to wait and just see who you would dominate once you get elected? That don't make no sense there. That's like saying, it's like, well, listen, I got a box here. You can either vote for me to give you the box or not to give you the box. There could be a turd in the box. There could be a $1 million check. You're going to have to vote for me to find out. You could be saying there's a bill in here, in this package here. I got a piece of paper here that's a tax bill. And it could either lower your taxes or raise your taxes. Vote for me and you'll find out which one it is. So that's part of the reason you're supposed to vote, is to do that sort of thing there. So that's one of the big issues they had going in. One of the other big things they were going off of were the law enforcement here. And the law enforcement issue there has to do with defunding the police in a number of these big cities like Minneapolis and Portland and all these cities that are that do have Democrat mayors, but that doesn't necessarily mean it couldn't happen in other places. But predominantly in Democrat cities, they're trying to present this idea that they could go to more socially or community-based policing, which would basically mean you don't have a badge, it's the communities managing themselves there. Well, I have to just say, if a community was going to manage itself, they would have already instituted something like that. So that don't make any sense to me. But one of the things they're talking about is they want to put psychologists. Biden said psychiatrists. You don't want to send a psychiatrist to a crime scene there. They prescribe drugs. You would send maybe a psychologist or like a social worker or what have you, but you wouldn't send a psychiatrist there unless you're planning on getting them some drugs. Here, you need some serious drugs. Here, take this so you won't keep doing what you're doing there. So, but their idea is, they're not calling it defunding, they're calling reallocation. And all that means for those who ain't familiar with the word there, reallocation just means redirecting the money. That's basically the same thing as defunding in a way, but instead of putting the money out of the police department, they would expand the police department with civilians that don't have police training, but they would become a part of the department, but they're not designed for engagement in a physical altercation. They're designed for coming in to consult if they wanted to bring a psychologist or a social worker there to a scene, and they thought that they could resolve a high tense situation by having someone come and talk to the person, and that might help to address the situation of violence or what have you. Now, police already have a type of person like this called a negotiator that goes out. If you ever see the movies where they have like a guy who's talking to the criminal on the phone or what have you, and or they're outside a building trying to talk to someone or whatever, in that kind of situation, they already have these negotiators, and part of their training is in psychology. So they already got something like that. They're just hoping to, their idea is to expand the presence of those people in crime scenes. Now, you can say maybe that would help, maybe, But you could also say you're adding a person to the potential endangered list, because if they're not police trained to protect themselves or have an idea of how to serve in that situation, if you can't talk someone who's a violent criminal down, and there's a lot of violent criminals, you could talk to them all day long, it ain't gonna change their perspective on the world. And you can't change someone's behavior overnight. You could try and manipulate them into putting a gun down, but if you got a guy who just shot 4 people, you ain't gonna be able to change his mind with a conversation about how he should put down the gun and come out peacefully. You could say all night to him, hey, listen, you're going to be okay. We'll work through this together. He don't know you. You can try that. It ain't going to work very well, but that's what they want to do, is reallocate towards like social services type behaviors there. But VP Biden said that he did not want to defund the police. Well, it's not technically defunding by the word, it's reallocation, but what it's doing is removing the financial resources to employ police officers there and using it to employ social workers and what have you. Meanwhile, the Trump there, he wants to maintain the law and order, and he keeps pointing out that he's offering to come in and help the people in Portland, but he won't do it. He can't do it until the mayors ask him to come and help. So apparently, we keep going, and we've talked about this Insurrection Act before, and essentially the mayor has to request federal assistance to resolve an issue. That did happen back there during the riots in California. They called for assistance. But you have to use the Insurrection Act basically to try and go against, the president has to basically call on the Insurrection Act to go and do something in a city if they're not participating in stopping excessive violence in their community or what have you there. So as far as Chris Wallace there, the moderator guy there, who wasn't particularly impressive in my opinion, period. It's got nothing to do with him liking one guy over the other. I just don't think he was particularly impressive there, because all he did was constantly interrupt both of them. The thing is here is, I'll try and get to Chris Wallace in a second there, but let me finish this thing about the situations here in Poland and what have you. Chris Wallace did ask VP Biden if he had called and asked the mayor of Portland to try and end the violence and to really put in serious effort into ending it. And VP Biden said, no, because right now I'm a private citizen. You could be a private citizen, but you've got an established record with the government. So you could still call, and even if they can say, well, you're not a politician in charge of anything right now, I ain't going to listen to you. At least you could say, well, I reached out to them and said, hey, listen, I'd like to really see if we could stop this. It's not helping people. It'd be great for your campaign if you want to show that you care about law and order and, peaceful resolution. That would help for your campaign, because they could say, hey, he called me and he's been talking to me about ideas and I see where he's coming from, but he didn't do that. And that's fine. He doesn't have to do it, but it's really more showing initiative. If you want to try and show you're actively looking for solutions, you should be out there doing it. One of the other things I don't care for with VP Biden's perspective is like, I would do things differently, but he won't tell you how he would do things differently, other than if the scientists told him, and that depends on who the scientists are, told him to shut down the government, he would shut down the government, or he would shut down the country. So he's not clear on what he would actually do. He's just saying, I'll do a better job, But I mean, I could tell you I'd do a better job on fixing your TV than you, but you don't know that I can do that. You'd have to, like, just let me do it. It's like him talking about the Supreme Court and what have you, and the filibuster thing, ending the filibuster. He's telling me, elect me and you'll find out what I do. Well, that could be all kinds of dangerous there. So just elect you and say, let's just see what he does there. We already know the track record he's had on a number of things. What happens if he tries to reinstitute the 1994 crime bill thing there where he was putting more and more people in jail? How do you know he won't do that? How do you know he won't try and limit your liberties by putting in justices that believe that you need to lose the Second Amendment, that you need to limit freedom of speech? How do you know that if you don't know the people he would appoint to the Supreme Court there? So those are a couple things there that he talked about. We'll just say here about the Chris Wallace thing before we wrap this one up here for now. What I thought was the most pointless part about Chris Wallace was that he did fine in asking the questions. I didn't really have a problem with the questions one way or another. He can ask whatever he wants. That's the whole idea of a moderator. You're giving him permission to ask whatever he wants. But there's ways around the 2 minutes for each candidate and what have you. So the idea is that the moderator says, okay, you got 2 minutes to talk about this subject I've just talked about. Go. And then he goes to the other guy and says, you have 2 minutes to talk about it. Go. And then they do their thing. Well, the problem is if you really are committed to that, what you should do is kill someone's mic for 2 minutes so that there's no noise issues whatsoever. If you really don't want anyone to talk, kill their mic, right? And then bring it back up. And then after that 2 minutes of each person getting to talk about their perspective on things, let them have a little back and forth there, because what it shows you is who's the stronger participant in it and who's more willing to let someone say what they want to say and then come back and interrupt their point or what have you and say, look, this is why what you're saying is wrong, and call them out on stuff. So that would be more logical there, is for them to do that. But he kept trying to. So when Trump would interrupt VP Biden or vice versa, you already have two voices talking, and then Wallace would come in with a third. And at that point, nobody's hearing each other one way or another. Trump is a dominant voice type of person here. He's got very specific ideas and a very specific way of being. This is a New York thing. This is a Northeast thing. And you don't understand it if you don't understand what people in the Northeast are like there. It's not just here. People in Scotland are very aggressive and what have you. Irish folk can be that way too. That's because I know Irish people here. Italians can be that way. Very aggressive people. It's just a different style and behavior. Latino people are like that too sometimes. Black people are like that. Less white people are aggressive. Normally, less white people is aggressive. But it's not in a negative way of saying aggressive. I guess what I should be saying is they have more dominant kind of tendencies. They will not just accept someone saying something they don't believe is true. So they're more assertive. Maybe that's the word I should use. They're more assertive with a loud voice there. And they come back and will say something to you. And that's what Trump is like. He's more assertive than the normal white person. White people can tend to be try to be very calming in situations. And that's fine. I'm not insulting the idea of being a calming presence. But at some point, you got to have somebody who will talk up and try to lead that fight one way or another. And that's what Trump is. Whereas Biden, VP Biden, no disrespect intended, but VP Biden is really more of a laid-back person. The challenge that someone like that faces in negotiations, it's easier to get them to be quiet. And it's easier to get over on them if you're more assertive in a negotiation with someone. You raise the bar of what you want many times higher than you ever wanted it to be. And when that person who's a weaker force tries to come up to match you in one way or another, to work with you, they usually end about where you wanted to actually be. And if they go further, then you get your way even more. But if they come up even halfway and your assertiveness came up really, really loud originally and really vocal, and then they go, oh, okay, well, I'm not going to do that, but I'll do this. Well, sometimes that medium ground is where the super assertive person wanted to go in the first place. But they used that extra, attitude to try and pull that weaker personality closer to what they wanted. And that's what Trump has done with, trade and what have you. He's demanding high levels of stuff, but settling for lower, because that's actually what he was expecting to get ultimately. But he just pushed for more. And if he got it, great. If he didn't, no harm done, because he knew what he was aiming for. And that's just a step there. See, what you do is you do that thing and you get an agreement on one level for something. And they go, oh, okay. And you finally agree on something that you were expecting to get. And then the next time you decide to engage them in a debate, you raise that bar again. And more likely than not, if they've already agreed once to a certain set of rules, they'll start to adjust to agree with your new set of rules, at least to some degree, and then they keep moving. They keep moving the ball closer and closer to their control. Hope that makes sense there to you. So my point was with all that there is that VP Biden is a little more of a subdued personality. And subdued personalities are usually the ones that don't control the conversation. They're the ones who are just sitting there listening and trying to find a peaceful coexistence. And when it comes to foreign matters and political power plays, just trying to get along don't work. That ain't how the world works. You got people like Pelosi. She's aggressive. She pushes people. She's stubborn. Now, you may not like her for that, but that's how she succeeds, is because she's stubborn. Schumer is stubborn. McConnell is kind of stubborn, not super stubborn. But you got a lot of these people. Ted Cruz, that guy, he's pretty stubborn. Lindsey Graham is kind of he's a waffly guy there. You got Dianne Feinstein, who's pretty stubborn. You got Dick Durbin, who's pretty stubborn. You got Kamala Harris, she's pretty stubborn. And you may not like their personalities. I'm not telling you to like them one way or another. And they present their assertiveness in different ways. Some do it passively aggressively, and some do it just sort of all-out war type mentality. But that's how you accomplish things. And that's why a bulk of people ain't in politics. That's why you want those aggressive people who are playing out in politics, because that's how you get your way based on your beliefs. If you agree with their beliefs, you want them to go and do it because you couldn't do it. You don't have that skin. So I think that's enough here for now. You're long past your break, I'm sure, and I apologize if you had to start and stop this thing here, but hope that gives you a little idea there, and thanks so much for listening. I really appreciate it. Hope that gives you some insight, and you enjoy the rest of your day, and we will talk again pretty soon. And as always, God bless you.